Yo, what's going on everybody? In today's video, we'll be ranking and reviewing the areas of the Souls series' progenitor, Demon Souls. The remake to be specific. The criteria I'm using to determine which area I place above another is basically how fun of a time I had exploring it, how well it's designed, its aesthetics perhaps, the environment and vibe I feel, but mostly it comes down to how much I enjoyed traversing through it, you know. There's 15 levels including the tutorial zone, the nexus and below the nexus, which I'll be accounting for throughout this discussion. What I won't be taking into account however are the archdemon zones of worlds 2 to 5, so the underground temple, the ivory tower, altar of storms and the rotting haven. As well, who does that to be honest, they're just glorified boss arenas. And I can save boss arenas for an entirely different video, but for the sake of the video, I'll just display my ranking of those four here on screen. Now without further ado, let's jump right into this. I don't outright hate any area in Demon Souls, except this one. Man, fuck this level, I have an unending trauma to the Depraved Chasm, which ranks 15th and last in today's video. Nestled within the Valley of Defilement, the Depraved Chasm stands as a grim testament to the decay and corruption that permeate the world of Demon Souls. This desolate expanse of darkness and despair presents players with a harrowing journey, fraught with danger and terror. As players descend into the depths of this chasm, they are immediately enveloped by the oppressive atmosphere. The chasm is a labyrinthine maze of interconnected pathways and hidden chambers, testing players' navigational skills as they struggle to find their way through the darkness. In my own playthrough, the order in which I usually progress goes 1-1 to 1-2, then the rest of the -1 levels, meaning that I'll usually have 5-1 as my 6th level. I know players who go later, and I know some who'll go even earlier, but I think at the time I enter as the 6th level is the most appropriate. Well, that doesn't change the fact that it's an absolute claustrophobic nightmare. The hazards presented in the Depraved Chasm are as treacherous as they are varied. From precarious ledges to crumbling bridges, every step forward is fraught with peril. This area is also home to a myriad of grotesque creatures, from the deformed, depraved ones to the irritating rats and annoying giant ticks. Each foe in this area specifically poses some sort of threat to unsuspecting players, whether they be alone or in groups. Mostly in groups. Speaking of which, damn is there a ton of ganks in this area. One of the lore points of this archstone, the Valley of Defilement, is that the depraved ones are viciously out to hunter those who wander within, so that they can deliver their souls to the one that saved them, that being Maiden Estrella, who we meet later. Look man, I get that, but damn, the ganks in this area can be brutal. I've spoken about this once before, but I need this to be known. I've done a full New Game Plus playthrough of Demon Souls, and getting through the Depraved Chasm is possibly one of the toughest things I've done in this game. The enemies deal a ton of damage and made for such a rage-inducing experience. There are times when they'll even throw in a giant depraved one into the mix, which takes the already chaotic experience and essentially doubles it because, oh boy, trying to juggle this giant being with their normal sized counterparts is a struggle. There's also a section with a horde of rats, which is really annoying if you're just trying to get through, as any single hit from any of these small critters result in the player being inflicted with plague, which is just brutal, especially if you come here relatively early. The atmosphere of this area is extremely iron-fisted. It is a place filled to the brim with despair and suffering, inhabited by the outcasts and pariahs of the Valley of Defilement. As players journey deeper through this abyss, they encounter the tormented souls of those who have succumbed to the darkness, their anguished cries echoing through the corridors. This place is a haunting reflection of the world's moral decay, a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition and greed. The environmental storytelling is apparent as we progress through the level and see it slowly change. Leeches stuck to the floors and walls as we close in on the boss of the area, which is indeed a nice touch. This level's not 100% horrible, but it does drive me to a point of frustration that makes me happy to place it as the worst area in Demon Souls. Coming in at second to last is 5-2, the Swamp of Sorrows, already wrapping up my discussion for the Valley of Defilement. After completing the hellhole that is the Depraved Chasm, my only thoughts on my initial playthrough were that surely it could not get any worse, right? Well, if this was based off that first playthrough, then yeah, for sure it did get worse. However, after multiple runs of this game, I actually find this place better than 5-1, though not by much. 5-2 is infamous for starting one of the most despised trends in the Souls series, and by that of course I mean its traumatizing poisonous swamp. In the future, we'd go on to receive notorious levels such as Blighttown and Farron Keep, and even with all the complaints and distraught that those areas have brought to players, I still don't think they did it as harshly as Demon Souls' Swamp of Sorrows. Not only does it slow down your mobility and gradually seep away at your health, but the icing on top is that you're also unable to roll and punished if you try to with this incredibly aggravating animation. Like, make me slower, that's fine, but taking away my rolls? Come on, FromSoft, that's a dick move, man. In the remake, they did add the Sodden Ring to combat the awful rolling issue, but it's only available in pure black world tendency at the bottom of 3-2, which means that most first time players will probably end up missing it, which is just a typical Miyazaki move, isn't it? The enemies in this level make you play extremely safe and strategically, with the terrain being uneven, combined with the fact that your rolls essentially turn you into fucking mincemeat. This turns the area into one huge mind game right from the very start. Each step forward is met with the unsettling noises of unseen terror, creating an atmosphere of tension and anxiety. The combination of environmental hazards and formidable enemies makes navigation through the swamp a nerve-wracking experience, to say the least. Trying to make your way through this nightmare filled with depraved and giant depraved ones isn't easy whatsoever, so it's best to save this level for later on in your playthrough, which happens naturally anyways, due to it being the second level in one of the last Archstones. If the player had to complete this level as early as we do, with Blighttown and Farron Keep naturally, then you bet your ass this would have been last place. The little village towards the end really gets my blood running, as I know I'm close to the shortcut and fog gate, which means being able to close out on this absolute terror of a level. However, there are about 50 enemies in that village, so you'd best be prepared to keep that shield up, as just when you think you're in the clear, another one will randomly appear. Despite all the atrocities and frustrating hardships attached with traversing through the area, it's not all negative. For one, I do like how there's a certain mystique to the whole level that admittedly seems quite pacifying, mostly at the start of the level, before you encounter any serious threats. Just trying to trudge through the poison, alongside the dimly lit torches guiding your way, presents an unsettling ambience that I find quite unique and endearing to this level alone. There's also the fact that the beginning portion isn't as jam-packed with enemies as the Depraved Chasm, making the experience somewhat more calmer in comparison with its predecessor. I also think it's quite obvious that this oppressive and thick misery is what FromSoft were going for, and I can for sure say that the Swamp of Sorrows represents the hopelessness and revolting atmosphere perfectly. Hey, it also houses the Moonlight Greatsword, which is a nice juxtaposition to put in this level as the holy weapon of God in the most despair-ridden area. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So yes, although I do have a grave disdain towards Miyazaki's original Poison Sword, it's not complete garbage. Maybe 95%, but not that other 5%. I have strong feelings towards both the areas within the Valley of Defilement, albeit mainly negative. There's still strong feelings nonetheless. The Tunnel City, however, which comes in 13th place, is possibly the only area in the game which I feel barely anything towards. I don't have the disdain I do for the Depraved Chasm and the Swamp of Sorrows, but I also don't harbour any love for it that I do with some of the areas that will come later on in the list. It's kind of a generally mundane level in my opinion. Regardless, it is pretty neat how you have the option to choose between two directions in which you can venture off to right from the bat. The left takes you to a sprawling network of interconnected passages, looping chambers, and structures carved deep into the heart of the earth. A subterranean labyrinth which is accompanied with the harsh intensity of the underground city. Whereas the right takes you directly to the boss fight. What? It raises the question, is it actually worth exploring the left side on subsequent or even your first playthrough? Like, if 2-2 was an area of much higher quality, then I'd be fine with it. But seriously, sometimes it's not worth clawing through that mess of the Tunnel City when you can just do some platforming and get to the boss straight away and get this level done with. Admittedly, the platforming isn't great and can result in a few deaths, but once you learn the route correctly, it's easy as pie and you'll probably be doing it a lot considering who the boss of the area is. Well, if you do end up going left, which most of us will to see what it has to offer, then you're just met with bear bugs, and a bloody lot of them as well. These have to be one of the most tedious enemies to go up against in the entire game, especially the huge ones. They have a shit ton of health and they're in cahoots with patches, for fuck's sake. It's nice to see him here, by the way. I guess that's one redeeming factor, if you consider him a good thing, which actually on second thought, maybe that isn't a redeeming factor. What I definitely do consider a redeeming factor is this Crystal Lizard Haven, a room bathed in the light and treasures of these colourful creatures. Just be quick upon entering as they disappear rather swiftly, resulting in a lot of trips back to clear the room in its entirety. One of the more striking features of the Tunnel City is its verticality. The area does a decent job challenging players to explore and conquer the depths and heights of the underground domain. From winding staircases to perilous ledges, players are tasked in navigating this confusing environment, constantly searching for hidden paths and secrets that may eventually lead them to their escape. I do love the wider design of the Stonefan tunnel as a whole. It's like a deep descent to slay an ancient god. It just sounds epic, a lot more epic than what's actually at the end, but that's besides the point. All in all, the Tunnel City is one of the more mundane levels that Demon's Souls has to offer, but hey, it only goes up from here at least. The tutorial level of the first Souls game places 12th in this list, which is kind of hilarious actually, as it's quite straightforward and basic in design and gameplay. By no means is it a bad level. Actually, I don't think From Software have ever created a bad tutorial level now that I think about it. Do let me know if you disagree, but in my opinion, they don't miss when it comes to getting new time players comfortable with the world's vibe and what to expect from there on out. When it comes to Demon's Souls' tutorial, however, it's entirely optional, which I think is the only time From have ever done this in the series, presenting the choice to actually skip an area straight up. It's a great alternative on display, as yes, like I said before, it's pretty basic, especially on subsequent playthroughs as there's not too many enemies. However, I think it is worth going for, even rushing it just to duke it out with the Vanguard Demon that one time. The fact that you only get one shot at this behemoth creates a certain tension and intensity that honestly isn't there with a lot of the other bosses in this game. Plus, I think the rematch in 4-1 is a lot worse because of those annoying storm beasts shooting at you. I'm also counting that very brief area that comes after beating the Vanguard Demon for those who actually do manage to fell the beast on the first try. It's a great reward for the players displaying their adept skills very early on, giving them access to resource mats, healing items and additional souls. Accompanied, of course, by a punch to the face from that bastard, the Dragon God. You'll be getting used to those, I'm sure. Another cool thing is that it's actually impossible to die before you go through the boss fog, which is interesting. I actually only found this out when writing the script for this video. I'm surprised Miyazaki allowed for this kindness, in this game especially, which has some of the most brutal design philosophies. It's a very nice leisure to have, as it allows for you to have some fun with the enemies. It also provides for the best time to practice your parry timings without being punished. There isn't really much to say about it all, with it being a tutorial level, but for the very first Souls game in the whole continuum, I can say it's a great introduction for new players and veterans alike, and the fact that I have it over 3 levels, including an entire world, is kind of hilarious, to be honest. I wasn't really sure whether to include this area or not, considering its size and length being, absolutely minuscule, but here we are. Just missing out on the top 10, we have Below the Nexus, and man, can I say this place looks stunning. To my understanding, Below the Nexus is the uncoverable wilderness which was the first kingdom's initially, until consumed by the old one. He is here because he was miraculously put to sleep by the Nexus, which was done by the Monumentals. Once you obtain all of the demon souls from each of the worlds that the player can traverse through, the title of Strongest Demon transfers over to us, the player, and initiates the awakening of the old one. Most of Demon Souls' areas benefited in the visual department with the Blue Point remaster, but even in the original, Below the Nexus is gorgeous to behold, to be honest. Though despite its visual appeal, it's still quite mysterious and foreboding as we delve into the depths beneath the central hub of the game. It feels like a sharp contrast from some of the harsher looking yet grounded areas above to a more ethereal landscape. That cutscene of you and the Maiden in Black descending deep through the Nexus to her guiding the old one towards us so we can enter its chambers feels especially grand and meaningful. There's a reason FromSoft utilizes cutscenes that I describe as uncommon compared to many others in the market. It just hits way more when they're using it sparingly. Upon glancing around the area, players are immediately greeted by a sense of wonder and mystery, a desolate wasteland with dried up beaches along with the crumbled wreckage everywhere. Below the Nexus offers for quite the feast on the eyes, fitting for the finale of a game such as Demon's Souls. It's all a lead up to the final boss of the game, True King Alan, who's less of a boss, let's be honest, and more of a storytelling device. The final words you hear of your final area of the game questions you in what choice you will make after finally being granted an audience with the old one itself. And so the player enters with those words lingering on as they slay the boss that makes Pinwheel look intimidating by comparison, to end this long and hard journey once and for all. Cracking the top 10, we have the area that comes directly after beating the game's first proper boss, 1-2, the Lord's Passage. As a whole, I think it's fair to say that the first Archstone in Demon's Souls is one of, if not the best. It's got a ton of great content on offer and doesn't really falter with any of its levels. As players embark on this perilous journey, they are immediately greeted by the grandeur of the Boleteria Palace, the once majestic fortress now shrouded in darkness and overrun by demonic forces. The level's name, the Lord's Path, alludes to the significance of this route as players traverse the domain of the fallen king. It's one of the more linear levels that FromSoft have ever designed, essentially being an extended bridge that leads you straight to the boss fog, with the underground section accompanying it with similar tightness in layout. Actually, it's quite interesting how this type of level in particular has never been replicated in any of From's games, making it pretty damn unique compared to the rest. Do let me know if I'm forgetting a level similar to this. Despite that, I'm going to have to put 1-2 as the worst of the 4 levels in Boleteria Palace. The Lord's Path is a pivotal and challenging level to the player's journey that encapsulates the essence of the game's unforgiving difficulty. I've heard a fair share of people try out this level for the first time after defeating the Phalanx on the initial playthrough, only to give up on it entirely due to its harsh and brutal design. It can be rough on new players. The long and tight design with various enemy types from draglings to Boleterian soldiers, dogs to a bloody fire breathing dragon. This level shows no mercy when it comes to constantly applying pressure to the player. That dragon, by the way, oh my god, it is one tedious bastard. I'm fine with it whilst actually exploring the area, but once you get to the tower now, and God forbid you die, I'm a scrub by now. And then get ready to have him lengthen your already trashy run back by a while. Kill the creature if you want, but be prepared to spend an awfully long amount of time doing so, as it has a disgusting amount of health and can only be hit once every time he does his rotation around the bridge, which is about 20 seconds or so, and in the grand scheme of things, that makes the time to kill him so long, probably like 15 or 20 minutes. Another alternative would be to wait until you obtain pure white will tendency, then the dragon will disappear and you can traverse and loot the bridge to your heart's content, though there'll probably be little need for it by that point. A similar issue that I feel players may encounter when traversing through this level in the game is their healing resources. As we're all aware, the first child in the Souls series went for the limited healing style in the form of its grass system, a system that was only ever adopted into one more Souls game, Bloodborne. But other than that, the limited heals were never the primary healing system again. I feel like this is one of the levels when you can feel it at its most, as the amount of difficult enemy encounters can easily chip away at both your health and your grass. Though it does become a nice farm once you defeat the Tower Knight and are able to use its checkpoint to go backwards and kill the Blue-Eyed Knights. One last thing is the boss run. My goodness, is it a struggle, especially with that dragon, which pretty much doubles the time necessary in which you'll be running. Honestly, that's probably the main issue I have with this level. If they added a shortcut at the end and gave easy and simple access to the Tower Knight instead of having to run this huge gauntlet, then I'd most definitely have a more positive opinion on this level. Still though, it's pretty decent, but there's a lot better to come on this list. Moving on from one path straight into another, landing in 9th place, we have the area that comes after defeating the Adjudicator, Fortu, the Ritual Path. I have a lot to say about this one, so let's start with what the Ritual Path does well. First and foremost, its atmosphere is nothing short of chilling. From the thick air that shrouds the crumbling ruins to the haunting enemies that echo through the corridors, Fortu does a great job in creating a sense of oppression and isolation that feels like a necessity when it comes to the Souls experience. This heavy ambiance succeeds in keeping players on edge, heightening the tension and making every step forward feel like a leap into the unknown. I just love the atmosphere that this level has, constantly descending throughout the level, slowly making our way to the old hero feels epic, but it also feels forbidden because of the ancientish aesthetic the level has going for it. The way the area continuously switches between the perpetual darkness indoors with only faint glimmers of moonlight piercing the profuse mist that hangs in the air, to the mystical outside scenery accompanied by the everlasting rain, the calming sound of the winds and the distant crying echoes of the storm beasts, to finally the majestically surreal Slug Pit. Wow, Slug Pit sounds so underwhelming in contrast to how beautiful it looks. This level did a great job in showing me how Demon Souls uses atmosphere to its benefit. As I uncovered the secrets hidden within the Shrine of Storms, I could piece together a tragic history of the realm and the dark forces that threaten to consume it. A truly great job in immersing me in the world's design and narrative, the richness exuding itself and becoming very apparent as I made my way down to the end. Of course, exploring that before you eventually discover the Fog Gate and take on the old hero. So when it comes to aesthetics and atmosphere, the Ritual Path is amazing and honestly does a lot of the heavy lifting for the area in general. Now the gameplay, let's get it out of the way. Worst boss run in the game. The absolute pinnacle of garbage. The old hero isn't the toughest boss by any means, but I think his style would catch a few players off guard on the first playthrough, with how quickly he can sometimes shift between extremely passive and terrifyingly aggressive. Having to run the whole level from start to end, each time you want to have a crack at him is just awful. Why would they do this, man? On a whole, I have no issues with the design of the level itself really, but similarly with the Lord's Path, this level could have really benefited with a shortcut towards the end, as in my opinion, it's one of the game's more challenging levels. The pesky regular skeletons and their beefy counterparts can be annoying as hell to deal with. Running past them is nigh impossible without the use of soul remains, an item I almost always forgot to make use of. The Reapers are a great way to farm souls, but they and the shadow lurkers that they spawn deal a shit ton of damage, seriously, and sometimes the attacks feel so extremely tough to dodge. In the end, I think the ritual path has a lot going for it when it comes to the vibes that it gives off, along with the gorgeous visuals and aesthetic appeal, but ultimately it wrote itself off when deciding to forget about implementing a shortcut into its design, and because of that it leaves a poor taste in the mouths of many, mine included. Just missing out on the top half of today's list, I've got for us the smithing grounds. So remember when I mentioned the order in which I progressed through the levels? Well, the smithing grounds, aka 1-2, would be the third area that I'll go to in my playthroughs, but was my second in my initial run of the game. Finishing off the phalanx and then unlocking access to each world was really exciting as a new player, and to see the world of Stonefang Tunnel offer such a different vibe and character to the one that Boleteria did lit a flame beneath me. I was positively ecstatic at the idea of each world putting forward their own twist and environment for the larger world at hand. The potential was limitless, and even though a lot of areas afterwards didn't match my excitement, there were those that did and went beyond it. What I'm trying to say is, I'm glad From tried this idea of disconnected realms that offered a complete mesh of aesthetics and ambience, as it made the game feel very refreshing and unique. Anyways, come on, let's get to the actual area itself. The smithing ground is the first level in the world of Stonefang Tunnel, which is followed by the Tunnel City afterwards, that I've already discussed. The law of this area and the world as a whole is that it's an excavation site under the rule of King Alan. Whatever resources mined were used to aid the development of the Boleterian kingdom. The miners, faithful to their work, remained steadfast in supporting the king when the colourless fog approached. The thematic design for this level is really inspiring, an industrial setting with its towering furnaces and intricate machinery. It creates a sense of realism that is both intriguing and immersive. The level design too is fantastic, and I feel like it was a glimpse into how amazing some of the levels in their future games would be. The smartly placed elevator that takes you through multiple of the level's layers, including the very start of the area, sub-areas that you can't progress to until you interact with a certain mechanism which unlocks it, a gradual shift partway through as it introduces webs scattered about to hint at the boss that you're going to be facing. Even the classic FromSoft trolls, bridges that collapse as you walk over them, enemies that try and ambush you and get the jump on you. It even has Blacksmith Ed, the lovable fella, who assists us in creating boss weapons after defeating the Flame Lurker. There's a lot to appreciate with this area. It offers a lot of substance and makes you work to progress onwards. The enemies on the other hand are less interesting to speak about. I like the miners and the fat officials for the role they represent in the narrative and the setting. These lifeless miners just continuously going at it, sometimes even ignoring you as you walk past, and the fat officials being decorated with the whips as their weapons, alongside their fiery magic. It implies that their relationship with the miners were possibly more one-sided than we have thought. Playing against them, however, can be a different story. These fat officials are incredibly beefy and present a step up in challenge so early on. I'd be fine with it if the miners were also similarly tanky. Like, what the hell? How have they got so much health? Sometimes it doesn't feel worth killing them for the little amount of souls they drop. Also, there's dogs, everybody's favourite soul pets, right? The fire lizards can be a nuisance, but they're fine, I guess. Other than that, the enemies kind of suck to go up against, especially the miners. They got way too much health for this point in the game. Sometimes they're placed in the most inconvenient locations as well, seemingly to make encounters just as uncomfortable as possible, which I guess isn't too alien from software to do. Despite my ramblings at the end, I'm still fond of this level and its thought out design, which is why it places a lot higher than the level that precedes it. Island's Edge is the first level to appear in the Shrine of Storms and has some of my favourite memories, like my jaw dropping when first coming here, as well as me shitting my pants when that tree at the start of the level gets struck by lightning. It also has some of my most frustrating moments, aka anything to do with them damn silver skeletons. Their leash distance is insane and they are damn relentless and make it impossible to try and run past. In a way, it does make for a nice yet forced soul farm so early on, but man are they irritating. There's about 5 of them right at the start of the level before your rematch with the Vanguard demon that you'll have to kill each time you want to have a crack at revenge. Speaking of which, hey, it's nice that you finally get to duke it out with the beast again after he probably knocked you on your ass in the tutorial. It's a thrilling fight until the storm beasts decide to inevitably join in, as they really enjoy sending a strike or two at you every now and then. It doesn't mean the kill is any less satisfying though, as the rewards are plentiful, especially if you tackle it early on in your playthrough. Let's move on to something I think it does superbly, like almost every other Demon Souls level, and that is its atmosphere. Possibly some of the game's strongest in that regard. 4-1's atmospheric design is truly captivating. The coastal setting with its crashing waves and rugged cliffs creates a sense of awe and frightening amazement that is both haunting and beautiful. It's debatable that out of all the worlds in this game, the Shrine of Storms might come on top based on pure atmosphere alone, with the gorgeous introduction of Island's Edge, the captivating descent through the ritual path, and the otherworldly mystique of the Altar of Storms. The Shrine of Storms as a whole really shines and nestles the player through their journey in collecting demon souls, even if its gameplay is somewhat fun at best and downright rage-inducing at worst. Another interesting aspect of this level is its linearity in design, and by that I mean its lack thereof. Unlike the area preceding it, Island's Edge gives you a decent amount of freedom with which way you want to explore the level after you take on the first wave of skeletons. You can turn left and go up and across the structures to grab the copper key whilst avoiding the classic triple arrows trap. Make your way to fight a red-eyed skeleton. Visit the first iteration of the Trader Crows, a staple in the series. Venture onward to defeat the Vanguard demon and loot its surroundings. Proceed underground to rescue Grave Robber Blige, an excellent merchant who becomes your main source of grass after you defeat the Adjudicator, or just go through the fog and progress the natural way. You can even perform a skip to bypass all of what I just said and face the boss straight away, though it is kind of difficult to perform. Once you do go the natural way forward, you can make your way to the boss the long way, or try and take on the terrifying armada of skeletons that await you in the crumbling ruins of this level. It's a pretty tough section. Well, thankfully for all that hard work, the Adjudicator is one of the easiest bosses, so just don't die as that run back is horrible. With everything said and done, Island's Edge is an atmospheric beauty with challenging combat and a pretty well thought out layout and design, and I'm glad to place it in the top half of this list. The King's Tower is the culminating point for many players throughout their journey in Demon Souls. It's probably the area that they'll tackle last. The area with any actual gameplay, that is. What makes this area in particular stand out in the game is that, well, it's the only zone to offer actual gameplay before the final boss of the world. Worlds 2, 3, 4 and 5 only offer up 2 levels before chucking you into their final boss, whereas the world of Boleteria gives you a feast after you take on its second boss, in the form of the Inner Ward, which I'll get to later, and the King's Tower. Although it's not a fully fleshed out level like the rest, I still believe it has enough gameplay, design and substance to warrant it landing a decent finish on today's list. So once you defeat the Penetrator and continue, or come back later, you wander on further into this level and immediately see the corpse of a huge dragon laying on the ground, riddled with soldiers around it to have at you. I distinctly remember seeing the dragon's corpse stilly positioned in the front of the Archstone and just promptly wondering, damn, so this is how we're starting out here, the boss of this area should be something, and boy was I not disappointed. A great introduction to the final level of this royal and majestic yet crumbling and decrepit castle. It's soon after where you face the original gang squad, which for 1v3 fights go, it's actually not too bad. I don't want to break their hearts and tell them that they'd be ripped off in the future to create possibly the worst boss fight in the entire series. What's more interesting about them is that each Red Phantom is representative of each of the 3 bosses that you defeated prior in this world. Ulon, the archer, once being the Phalanx, Alfred, the dude with the giant shield and lengthy spear. I'm sure it doesn't take a genius to put together his resemblance with that of the Tower Knight, and Metis, who was once the Penetrator. The upcoming room houses a tough staircase encounter with some Boleterian soldiers and Imperial spies, and even 2 red-eyed knights. This is going to be tough. It's a room you either get good with or learn how to accurately evade all manner of attacks, as you'll most likely be coming through it a few times to say the least. I don't like this room, to be honest, and it's not because of the red-eyed knights, it's because of that damn Imperial spy. It's always managing to sandwich itself into my honourable duels with the red-eyed knights. The absolute bitch. Other than that, it's not terribly rough. What can be rough though is the section ahead. After meeting it in its very first level and probably forgetting all about its existence, let's be honest, the blue dragon finally shows itself and wreaks havoc on your way to the end. It's funny seeing him burn those fat officials though. Ever since the Penetrator, those guys have not been having a good time, I'm sure. Truthfully, I don't mind the blue dragon that much. It's not as much of a hindrance as I found the red dragon to be in 1-2, but because of that it also feels less memorable in a way. But I'll take being less memorable over being remembered for being a pain in the ass any day. Well, before getting past the blue dragon, you have to carefully bypass its flames, of course, and to help you with that, Bjor joins in, if you have freedom of course, and he offers to play the decoy as you run past. He could well walk away after you get past, but no, he probably thinks that you're going to kill the dragon and he could be seen as a hero. Blood doesn't realise I don't want anything to do with trying to slay the dragons in this game with their humongous health bars. By the way, thank God there's a shortcut to skip that part with the fat officials, my goodness. Otherwise this boss run would probably beat out the old heroes for how painful it could be. This whole level really does feel like the high point in a movie or series. First you're taking on the corrupted forms of previously defeated foes, then Bjor offers his help for the last time so you can take a shot at the big baddie, and then lastly the heartbreaking conversational encounter with Ostrava in which you finally piece together the man that you're about to face is his father, master, but he can't fight on, so the player essentially inherits his will as he passes and you emotionally face his red phantom form. All of this culminates in this extremely epic elevator ride as we take on the false king. All this hype, all this build up, only to die and realize you need to play the whole level again. Yeah, another level where the boss run back sucks. The elevator in particular, as it takes so goddamn long to reach the top and had me questioning my existence in the downtime between fighting. It's not as bad as the old heroes and doesn't knock too many points off for me, but it does suck regardless. 1-4 the King's Tower really does a great job at putting a tail end to most players' explorational journey, with its amazing presentation and storytelling combined with its environment and NPCs alike, and just falls short of our top 5, landing a highly respectable 6th place. Kicking off the top 5, we have the first mention of the Tower of Latria, the level that comes after the Fool's Idol, 3-2 Upper Latria. Tower of Latria houses 2 of Demon Souls' strongest levels in the game. I love the feeling that 3-2 gives off. It's similar to Bloodborne in its architecture and nightmarish visual design, and anything that's similar to Bloodborne is a win in my eyes. This even came first, which makes it a bigger win. Upper Latria is sinister yet beautifully haunting, with a ton to unpack and explore, and plays to one of Demon Souls' biggest strengths. I'll keep on saying it, atmosphere. The initial cutscene after defeating the Fool's Idol, where you're being brought up to the gargoyles, instills a very scary feeling. The dread after being brought so high up from where we once were, a place where we were finally starting to get comfortable with. It's kind of similar to Dark Souls 1 in a way, when we're taken from Sense Fortress all the way to Anor Londo. Being taken a long way from familiar territory and being thrusted into a whole new environment without warning, it can play with the player's nerves a bit. Once we step foot into the level itself, the scale of how far up we are settles in. In Anor Londo, at least we don't have to worry about falling to our deaths most of the time. In 3-2 however, you best be aware of your footing, especially when in combat with these incredibly goofy gargoyles. They couldn't even fix their AI in the damn remake. Speaking of which, it was awesome how they were blended in with the environment. It definitely had me paranoid throughout, after the first one jumped out at me in my initial playthrough. There's also the elephant in the room, that being the gigantuous beating heart acting as a backdrop as we wander about the level, wondering if it'll come into play or not. Spoilers, yes it does. It plays a not so subtle part into the horror of Latria, alongside the mindless prisoners, giving it energy until the player stumbles upon their cultist ritual and kills them, with the end goal being to drop the enormous heart and clear a way upwards. Another note is to watch out for Yurt, the silent chief, who, if you set free, is only going to cause some mischief in the Nexus. And by mischief, I mean kill the NPCs that inhabit it, so for the love of God don't free him, or if you do, just kill him straight away. Afterwards you can take the cage down freely, because despite all of that, there's a whole underground section that I still haven't spoken yet. A whole swamp filled with these man centipedes, victims of experimentation conducted by the old monk, I imagine. These grotesque creatures rid the swamp with the creepy noises they make and the disgusting movement to accompany it. The best thing about the swamp, however, that I'll tip my hat off to, is that there isn't a hint of poison or plague. There's nothing to hinder your movement at all, which is magnificent. I've also heard no one in my life ever complain about this aspect of the swamp. So, Miyazaki, you might want to take that as a hint. Once you've explored the lower section and looped back around, you'll be able to drop the heart, only to have played one of the most visceral cutscenes From have ever made. Out of the heart comes a bunch of these man centipedes, crawling grotesquely away from view, only to populate the upper portions of 3-2. A great cutscene that adds to the entire experience of this fantastic level. The last thing I want to say about this gorgeous and atmospherically dense area is that fuck these red phantom mind flayers. The Nexus serves a central role in the game's narrative and functions as Demon Souls' very own hub area of the game. It's less so like Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls 1 and Medulla from Dark Souls 2, as it doesn't have its own branching paths like they do, but it's more akin to the Hunter's Dream or the Round Table Hold from Bloodborne and Elden Ring, disconnected from their larger world and acting as more of a safe haven if anything. I love both these types of hubs and can definitely see the strengths for each, but man if the Nexus doesn't hold a special place in my heart. Its design as a central hub is masterfully executed. It really does serve as a central point in which players can access any of the areas from any world, providing some little sense of interconnectedness and continuity to the gameplay experience, even if it wasn't in the usual Dark Souls way. One thing I thought was a shame in Elden Ring was how they didn't include a feature like this. It would have been awesome to see various points in the round table where we could use to fast travel to other areas in the world, like it's done with the Nexus and the Hunter's Dream, instead of being able to just just do it from the very central gates or being able to pull up your map wherever you want. It's just a minor gripe, but it's whatever. The opportunity of respite that you get from travelling back here, especially after the long and arduous levels in the game, having only one checkpoint at the start of each of them, felt incredibly welcoming. The music that plays, phenomenal. I love how relaxing and soothing it is to hear. I can't count the amount of times I've used it whilst doing something else in the background. It's the perfect accompaniment to whatever it is you're doing. Even in game, it's just slow enough to make the player ponder about their overall journey between each tap of the piano. A feature about the hubs in some of these games that goes under the radar is how their music will sometimes shift depending on your state in the game, like in Bloodborne after transitioning over to the Pale Moon, or in Dark Souls 3 after you give the Firekeeper a pair of eyes. Here, once you've defeated a certain number of Archdemon bosses, the music shifts to a more sinister organ-based theme, and then one more time after defeating all 5 of them. A subtle yet immersive way of displaying the player's progress. The visual design is amazing with this ethereal architecture and vastly open space to wander around, though it maybe feels a bit too big as it feels like a lot of space goes on to feel underutilized. The ominous open space, however, at the front of the ground floor actually scared me on my first playthrough with all the red I saw, until I realized it was just a bunch of tips that would have really helped had I just checked it at the start of the game, which wasn't a good feeling. Like most of the other hubs though, a ton of NPCs will begin to populate its chambers after a while of you exploring each world, which is always a nice feeling. Interacting with each and learning about them and what they have to offer will give character and light to this dark, depressing world. I love everything about the Nexus, and honestly it's one of my favourite hubs in the series, filled with a lot of similarly amazing competition. The last 3 levels in this list house some truly excellent areas, and kicking it off with the bronze medal goes to 1-3, the Inner Ward. Once you slay your first Archdemon in the game, this level kindly opens up for you to progress through. In my personal experiences, however, I find the Inner Ward to be one of Demon Souls' more challenging areas because of the tight level design at times and the inclusion of the fearsome red-eyed knights. Once you do begin this level, your progress will be put to a halt shortly after when a cutscene plays in which the fat official closes the gate on you, forcing you to find another way around if you plan on getting to him. By the way, why is this guy trying to force some sort of rivalry between us? I don't think he understands how badly I killed some of his brethren in 2-1. Anyways, with the gates being closed, we have to go another way and navigate ourselves to the more narrowed slums, dealing with hordes of soldiers and even some Imperial spies who can be tricky to adjust to with their quick speed and aggression. Eventually, you will run into one of those terrifying red-eyed knights, and in an endearing way, it makes you question how far you've actually come, as your duel with it becomes much closer than what it was when it most likely battered you early on in 1-1. This time, however, you do prevail, but they're not used only once. They're used a lot of times and really heighten the intensity of this level a lot. Honestly, they may be in contention for one of my favourite enemies in the game. They bring a sort of rush and always elevate the gravity of a situation. Like, you know, when you see one of these guys, it's time to sit up and lock in. Progressing further on really shows to you the scale and magnitude of the Inner Ward. Knights, soldiers and spies around every corner. The reliance on so much defense builds up hype for the eventual clash we'll be having with the upcoming boss, and even the one after, to be honest. Well, once we unlock the gate, we'll be able to assist Ostrava once again, but more importantly, we'll get an actual shortcut provided to us, which is very nice for the boss run, but it's now time to take on the Gauntlet, a vicious bombardment of enemies from soldiers to archers to eventually a trio of red-eyed knights, which is up there for one of the trickiest encounters in the game. It does make for an immensely iconic one though, as it was even remade in Dark Souls 3 when playing through the Grand Archives on the way up to the Twin Princes. There's also some noteworthy side content available, like saving Yuri the Witch and freeing Bjorn of the Twin Fangs, who can assist you in the fight against the upcoming boss. Speaking of which, I'm trying not to include the bosses of the area when ranking them, but the lead up to taking down the fat official is nothing short of amazing, especially when you see him stabbed through the center by the penetrator in his introductory scene. Nothing in this area feels wasted and everything appears to be so meaningful and adds a ton to the world's environment and atmosphere. I feel like this area has the right amount of content to it. Excellent pacing where I don't find myself finishing this level in the blink of an eye, but it doesn't feel mind-numbingly slow either. And I think that does contribute to the success of the level as a whole, and why I and many others view it as one of the best in Demon Souls. The runner-up on today's list goes to 1-1, the Gates of Boleteria. FromSoft often miss with a lot of their ideas throughout all of the games. One thing that they certainly do not miss with is their opening levels of the games. And even then, amongst this catalogue of amazing introductory levels, I think that 1-1 stands as one of the best they've ever done. It's crazy to think that they pulled this out of the bag for their first proper level in the Souls series, a series we all love to death. There's a lot of content to partake in with this area, a myriad of ways to go, paths to explore, branches to take, and it's the prototype for every great level we've ever gotten from here on out. Hell, we even get a mini replica of it in Elden Ring with Stormveil Castle, which is another fantastic early game level. Right from the get-go, we get this cinematic cutscene that presents to the player the scale of what we're up against, before that red prick shows up, stuffed full with a bunch of bodies in his mouth. Greedy prick, save some for the other dragon, you bastard. And once we load into Boleteria, our goal is already right ahead of us. We just need to unlock it, of course. The grand entrance with this imposing architecture and crumbling walls creates a sense of foreboding and intrigue that draws players into the world of Demon Souls right from the very beginning. The traversal through on the first and even subsequent playthroughs is awesome and teaches a lot of what we can expect to go against from there on out. Ganks that require us to play slow and methodical, traps forcing the player to pay heavy attention to their surroundings, high level enemies that we can have a crack at but ultimately gain the idea that some challenges are best left later on. This level has it all. It also houses two of the most important rings in the game, nice and early on, those being the Cling and Thief rings, which can help out massively. I'm seriously a sucker for all of this level has to offer. Even the progression of enemies is genius, from draglings to Boleterian soldiers to the tougher blue-eyed knights, and when you're approaching the end, hoplites that eventually show up as the boss will start making an appearance to signify a big challenge the player will face soon after. All of that just to say that the Gates of Boleteria has incredible pacing and serves as a perfect introductory to the game's mechanics and combat, testing the player's skills and fundamentals across every turn. It's also the level where you're introduced to Ostrava and his harrowing questline for the first time, a standout in this game for sure. The dragon towards the end of the level that can almost flame you to pieces as you sprint for your life across that bridge, something that's kind of a staple in the series now. The specific section that can only be unlocked through pure white or pure black world tendency, offering even more content later on into the game. There's so many interesting and memorable encounters in this area alone. It proves that a ton of meticulous attention to detail and care was clearly put into this game. Also, hello, its boss runback being so excellently integrated with the level's design makes the level so much more special in my eyes. Like, I haven't even spoken about the incredible atmosphere once during this segment, which is how you know it can stand on its own two legs amongst the pack. But seriously, a medieval castle, who doesn't like that? It's a fantastic setting and a fantastic beginning level, a joy to experience and traverse through. Yet despite all of that praise, there still remains a level which I find even better. From the maze-like madness in design and the terrifying presences of the mind flayers to even the traumatizing screams of the NPC Rydell, 3-1 The Prison of Hope is a masterpiece of an area that shines in so many aspects that it was essentially a foregone conclusion when I was thinking of the placements for this list. Its atmospheric design is unparalleled. From the moment players step foot into this forsaken prison, they are enveloped in a palpable sense of despair and hopelessness. The dimly lit corridors, echoing cries of the damned, and oppressive architectural design create a hauntingly immersive experience that is unmatched in its intensity. There are many areas in the game that have made me feel uneasy or nervous while venturing, though none have done it so well as 3-1. The labyrinthine-esque structure that has me to this day feeling lost and confused is an unforgettable aspect of the Demon Souls experience. What adds to this is the sense of danger beyond every corner presented. Those mind flayers are genuinely horrifying to see, especially combined with the narrow walkways this area presents to us. The way they dart to you if one of their projectiles connects is scarily similar to a murderer in a horror movie chasing after his victim. Their presence alone is one of Demon Souls' strongest aspects. Even though I praised the previous two levels highly for their design and gameplay, when it comes down to it, the best areas combine both those things and elevate it further with the use of another aspect that I've hammered on about so much. Atmosphere. The atmosphere in this level is truly unrivaled for not only this game but the entire series. It's really tough to think of a level that has as thick of a presence as this one. It feels like I'm playing Outlast. It feels like genuine horror in a game that isn't even synonymous with the genre. It would be dope though if FromSoft did dive a little more into the horror subgenre. Little things like opening the cells across each floor, terrified whether you'll be attacked or not, and similarly enough with the cages sprinkled throughout that could sometimes reward you with an item or jump scare you with an ailment. The prisoner hall towards the bottom, conveying to you the lengths of the dark experimentation that's been going on through the Tower of Latria. The freakish royal mistress and the imprisoned sage freak, available to interact with after exploring enough to do so, each preparing to aid you on your quest. Every nook and cranny of the Prison of Hope is meticulously crafted to tell a story of despair and suffering, storytelling. From the decrepit prison cells to the makeshift gallows, this level's environmental storytelling adds depth and richness to the world of Demon Souls, immersing players in its dark and twisted narrative. What I love most about the Prison of Hope is its verticality. This is probably bullshit, but it feels to me as though designing a level purely based on verticality is quite a bit more challenging than the straightforward horizontal approach that most go for. It's great as it allows for some really clever implementation of the level's mechanics. In this case, the keys being used to progress onwards is the main one that comes to mind. Once you are finally able to step outside, it feels like an immense sigh of relief and fresh air. Being able to see the light of the sky is enough hope to assist a player in getting them to the finish line, even if the skylight is as dim and grim as a drinking and driving accident. Well, once you do step outside, you'll have to deal with the volley of arrows amidst a walkway that's not too far away from the boss of this area. This arrow machine does raise the blood pressure in my body considerably, by the way, as getting hit and stunned by it means certain death, and trying to find my way back here, no matter the playthrough, does not seem like fun. But with a couple of tries, the timings between each spree of arrows is quite easy to adjust to. The area is pretty much a wrap from there, but don't forget to take out this sneaky prisoner, otherwise you'll be extremely confused once you beat the Fool's Idol. All in all, the Prison of Hope is a masterpiece of a level, blending together atmospheric design, an intricate and thoughtful layout, and challenging gameplay that sets the standard for Demon Souls' areas. It is a standout amongst standouts that left an everlasting impression on me long after I left its dark corridors behind. Alright, the list is complete. Well, what did you guys think of this list? Anything you disagreed with heavily? Let me know your favourite or least favourite areas in the game in the comments and why. With this video, I was looking to do a semi-comprehensive dive into each area this fantastic game has to offer, and thus it became quite an extraordinarily long video for my standards. But that may not be such an alien amount of length in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Give it a like, share it around to any Souls loving fans you know, and subscribe to the channel, as you bet your ass I'll be making similar content to this in the near future. Have a great day, I'll catch you lot in my next video. Thank you and peace.